Hello everyone, it's Dio from Firm But Fair Gaming, bringing you another Diablo 3 video. Enjoying all the videos and content we produce, don't forget to click on that subscribe button, click on that like button, and don't be afraid to share. Don't forget to click on the notification button, customize it however you want, but that way you're notified whenever we publish another video. Welcome everybody. As promised, we are bringing you another Season 25 video. Today we are covering the Gears of Dreadlands Set. So this is, of course, the video that we promised after our hilarious failed attempt to roll a primal set with our 5,000 bounty mats. That was painful. You can check out the video if you want to watch that. But anyways, here we are. We're going to be bringing you the video here, outlining the build, what you need for items, rotations, and all that fun stuff. So that without any further ado, let's jump into it and show you the build. So first, let's go over what the actual set does. So the two-piece bonus is you gain momentum when attacking with a primary skill and a max duration of 20 seconds. Your primary skills deal 10% increased damage per second of momentum. Your 4 pieces strafing against enemies will automatically shoot your last used primary skill and also gives 60% damage reduction while strafing and for 5 seconds after. While strafing, you gain 8% increased movement speed for each second of momentum. And lastly, the 6 pieces, your primary skills deal 15,000% damage. So basically it works like this. You're going to use a primary skill. So here we're using Hungry Arrow. Get your momentum up. And then you're just going to strafe around and keep your stack up. And while you're spinning, you're going to be doing strafe, as well as you're going to be shooting your primary ability, which is getting that 15,000% increased damage. And that's what you're going to be doing, utilizing to kill everything. Okay. For the items for this build, we are utilizing all 6 pieces. So this is not a Ring of Royal Grandeur build. So we are wearing all 6 pieces. And then the complementary pieces that we need are, we're going to be using Scorched Necklace to get the maximum damage output we can. So when we're not taking damage, we get a stack down here for the Scorched Necklace, increasing our damage by up to 100% if we haven't taken damage in 10 seconds. So basically we want to keep this up all the time and maximize our damage output. We're also using the Hunter's Wrath, so your primary skills attack 30% faster and deal up to 200% increased damage. We also have the Wraps of Clarity, so our hatred generators reduce our damage taken, so this is our survivability item. We are using Focus and Restraint, so when we hit with a resource generating attack, we deal 50% increased damage, and when we hit with a resource spending attack, we deal 50% increased damage. So that is basically always going to be up while we're strafing around. And then for our weapon, we are using Vala's Bequest. So we have, and the reason that we want that is because of the unique secondary here where the strafe projectiles can pierce. So it'll go through targets and we can hit multiple targets at once. And then lastly, we also want the 9th series satchel because our Hungering Arrow is guaranteed to pierce and also deals up to 600% increased damage, and it can pierce up to 4 times. So those are the items that we want to utilize for this build. For our cube, we are wanting to use Dawn. So Dawn reduces the cooldown of Vengeance by 65%. So in the higher keys, we're going to be using the Dark Heart onto Vengeance, which is basically going to reduce the damage that we take for survivability. In lower keys, we can change that into increasing our damage. We also want to be using Depth Diggers for our armor, so that's going to increase our primary skills, deal 100% additional damage. So that's going to stack on top of the 15,000% increased damage that we're already going to deal. And then for a little bit of extra survivability, because at the high keys there's tons of damage, after casting Shadow Power, Smokescreen, we're going to be using the Elusive Ring. So after casting Shadow Power, Smokescreen, or Bolt, we're going to take 60% reduced damage for 8 seconds, which is going to let us stay alive and keep getting those pierces off. That's just going to help slowly whittle everything down in the high keys. That's basically how it's going to work for us. For our legendary gems, we are going to be using Simplicity Strength, so it increases the damage of your primary skills. And after rank 25, hits with primary abilities heal you for 4% of your max health. We're also going to be using Tagak, so we're going to gain armor. We're going to gain increased damage for 1.5 seconds when you spend resource on a channeled skill. So basically, while we're, as you can see, is building up here,
while we're strafing, we're going to be building stacks, which is going to increase our armor as well as our damage. And then the rank 2 here is gain 2% increased armor for every stack. So like I said there, that's where we're going to get our armor. And then of course we're going to be using Bane of the Trap, which is going to increase damage against enemies under the effect of control and parrying effects. And then of course the Bane of the Trap has that built in. At rank 25 we gain the aura that reduces enemy movement speed by within 15 yards by 30%, thus increasing the damage we're going to be dealing to them. For our soul shards, we're going to be using the Sliver of Terror. So on this, we want to have the Devastating Ring of Fire because we're going to just whittle away enemies. We're not really going to be blowing them up per se. So we're going to be getting big groups and kind of, that's why we have so much survivability. So we can just constantly be around them, shooting them. And we're going to proc that ring, and it's going to help us kill the mobs that we have gathered and help us progress through the rift. For the one in our weapon, we're going to be using the Essence of Anguish, and so I don't actually have the right roll on one so far. But the one that we're looking for is you want, when you kill an enemy, you deal the damage done by the death blow to all enemies within 25 yards. Pets and followers can't trigger it. And then, of course, each time you deal poison damage to an enemy, you increase your cooldown reduction and movement speed, while your damage received is increased by 5% for 10 seconds, max 10 stacks. So that's one that we want to use. So with that, you also have to remember that you need to have poison damage on your weapon. So on the Balla's Bequest, you got to roll poison damage onto it. So it makes it a little bit harder, but it is what we need to do, and it is very, very useful. So this kind of trigger effect, when something dies, it'll blow up, kind of like the Ren does in the Barbarian build for Wrath of the Waste. And then it kind of causes a chain effect. And then when we get our 100, we're going to proc off our Sliver of Terror, and it's just kind of going to build off that. So the idea is to have huge stacks that we're kiting through the rift and whittling down over time, using that Ring of Fire and of course this off the Essence of Anguish to help us progress through the rift. All right, now let's take a look at the skills that we're going to be utilizing in this build, and then while that is going on, I'm just going to throw up a video here of the build in action in the bottom left. So the first skill that we're going to be using is Vengeance with Dark Hearts. This was touched on earlier. This is just going to give us 20 seconds of damage mitigation. We're also using Preparation with Focused Mind. So this is just going to help us constantly gain discipline over time, keeping it topped up. And the reason we want that is we're going to be using Smokescreen, and that uses a lot of discipline. So we're going to be using that all the time as well. And so this is just basically going to help keep our discipline up so we can spam Smokescreen as often as we want. Now we're also going to be using Strafe, and so using that with Drifting Shadows, this is just going to increase our movement speed while we're strafing around. We are also using, I already touched on Smokescreen here, and we're using Special Recipe as the runes, so we vanish from sight, so we're invisible and can't take damage. Then we're using Hungering Arrow with Devouring Arrow, so it increases the damage of the arrow with each enemy that it pierces, and seeing we're going to have huge stacks, that's going to help us whittle down the groups, getting that 100 kill to proc the Sliver of Terror. Band of Knives, we're going to unleash a flurry of knives that strike and slow all nearby enemies, and it's going to give us armor, but the more important thing is it's going to slow them to help us as we kite them around to keep us from taking damage. Because although with all the mitigation that we have on, if we do get, surrounded and hit, we're going to die. So we want to keep that. The slow just helps us kite them a little bit longer. And also we won't want to be hit because that would reset the Squirt's Necklace. So we want to keep that up as often as possible. So we're going to use that to help us kite and stay out of harm's way. So for our passives, we're going to have a Numbing Traps. So enemies you slow, chill, or hit with Fan of Knives have their damage reduced by 25% for 5 seconds. So that's also going to be a benefit of having that. Archery, so we're going to gain 8% increased damage from our bow, 50% critical hit damage from our crossbow. And then we're going to be using Call of the Week, so we're going to increase our damage against slowed enemies, so we're getting huge value out of the Fan of Knives. And then lastly, Ambush, you deal 40% additional damage to enemies above 75% health. So this is going to help us get past that first little bit and help us whittle down the elites, as well as just trash in general, anything that we're fighting. Because as we go and tag new things in this piercing through, the damage will go through and help deal more damage to those that are lower, thus getting us closer to killing them and proccing our Sliver of Terror. For the rotation, it's pretty much this. We want to shoot our Hungering Arrow, get up to 20 stacks, and then we're just going to strafe around, and occasionally, like every couple seconds, we're going to shoot another Hungering Arrow to keep our stack at 20, and then while we're around mobs, we're going to Phantom Knives to get that debuff going. Of course, I'm not hitting anything, so I can't generate more hatred. And then we're going to Phantom Knives when we're near targets. We're going to basically use Smokescreen, Vengeance, and Preparation on CD just to help with our survivability. And then we're just going to stay to the outside. You're going to Phantom Knives a group, stay to the outside, and then just basically do laps around them, trying to whittle them down, kill them, move, stack as best you can so you can go tag new groups, bring them back together, create big groups, because that's the idea. Because we have the piercing and we need to get the 100 kills to proc our Sliver of Terror, so we want to kite and create as big of groups as possible. But basically, that's all there is to it. We want to use our CDs, our defensive, to stay alive, Phantom Knives to apply the slow and our damage buff, and then we just want to spin in circles around them. Keep your momentum up to 20, and then we're just going to do laps around them. That's pretty much all there is. Eventually, everything's going to die, and then we're going to get the Rift Guardian, kill him, and collect our loot. For the stats that we're looking for in this build, so for our helmet, we want Dex, Vitality, and Crit. Our shoulders here, so I went with area damage. You could have easily also rolled on to either have cooldown reduction to help keep your Vengeance up more often. We also have here for our chest, we're just going to go with survivability, so I went with life. Could have easily rolled on here to have minus damage from elites. Our neck, so I have a pretty crappy score, so I think all my good ones are on all my other characters. So ideally here you would want crit, and then elemental. If you want elemental, you would go with cold, as that's the damage that we'd be utilizing from the Hungering Arrow. For our bracers, of course, it would be elemental, so cold, Dex, Vitality, and then max crit, as well with a high unique modifier. So here I only get 4.5%. Ideally, I would want 6% for the crit chance. For our gloves, this is a pretty good roll. So you got critical hit damage, chance, cooldown, and dex. That's pretty good. Attack speed, I don't believe as high here for the God set here, but you could do that as well if you have high Paragon as well. For belt, this is a pretty bad belt, but basically it's more of a survivability item. So you would want to have resist all here, because we are dex, so that turns into armor, so it'd be a little bit weak for the resistance. So we should have a resist all on here as well. So this is a survivability roll. Our rings, ideally, oh, I got a strength one. I didn't even notice that. So for our rings, same as usual that we want for rings, we would like to have 2 crits and a cooldown if possible. That would be ideal. For our pants, oh, I can't believe I didn't modify that. So we would have Dex, Vitality, and resist all as well on our pants. Scratch that, not resist all. Sorry, Hungering Arrow. I knew as soon as I said it, it was wrong, so I just immediately went and fixed that. So yeah, so on our pants would be the Dex, Vitality, and Hungering Arrow for the increased damage. For our boots, we're just going with survivability. I put a little bit of move speed on there as well. For our satchel, so I basically wanted to get the Hungering Arrow damage onto the satchel here, and ideally if I could have got crit damage on here as well, or crit hit chance, I would have liked to, but I couldn't get one. So here I have some attack speed with the Hungering Arrow. It's as good as I've found so far, but ideally, like I said, I would have liked to have had some critical hit chance. And then on the weapon, we need to have the poison damage to proc the Essence of Anguish, and then high strafe damage. And ideally, also, if we could have had plus damage here, that would have been nice as well. But obviously, that's a little bit hard to get. especially when you need to roll poison damage on. So this is the best one that I've had so far, but ideally that's what we would try to get if we could. So this brings us to the end of the guide. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know below. If you have any variations on the build that you use, let me know. I'd be happy to see what that is. This build is a little bit slower than others in the sense that, you have to create these big stacks and the hierarchies to get it going. Doesn't quite have the blow up potential of the other specs, but it has cleared a 150. You just have to be patient, create your big groups, and you'll be good to go. Once you get rolling, especially once you get those pylons, the build really starts to take off. It's a little bit slow at the beginning, but it does do quite well at the end, and it does have the 150 clear potential as well. Like I said, if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. As always, we appreciate any likes, shares, and subscribes. And until next time, we'll see you in the next video, and I hope you're enjoying Season 25.